Hello and welcome to the News Minute. The Government of India has introduced the One Nation, One Poll bill in the Parliament, and the opposition parties are opposing it tooth and nail. To talk about this, I have with me former Election Commissioner T.S. Krishnamurthy. Before I go across to him, here is a quick reminder: News Minute, News Laundry, and News Minute Tamil. We are a complete ad-free platform. We are not dependent on government ads or ad from political parties or corporates. We are dependent on you. So if you like our work, if you want us to continue doing that, do become a subscriber of the News Minute and support independent journalism. So, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
What is your take on this bill, the composition of this bill, and the committee that was formed to look into this?
I have not had a look at the bill as introduced in the parliament so far. I believe it is intending to have the target date as 2034 instead of 2029 dictated by the or recommended by the high level committee. As far as the committee is concerned, I think they have gone through the aspect of constitutionality and the manageable proportions of the bill, the recommendation. Well, they have come with certain recommendations, which, in my opinion, is worth considering, debating, discussing. From the point of view of an administrator, I always welcome this as a better method of managing elections in this country, particularly such a huge country with so much a voting population, with so many other activities in focus. It's good to reduce the time span for the elections as far as possible. I do agree it is not an easy job, but as a management proposition, it is possible. There is no difficulty in implementing the elections. But I always say that such elections should be with less number of phases. For example, it is better to have an election in each state only for one day instead of having it in 5 or 6 phases. Maybe there is some justification for such phased elections, but it can be got over by having enough manpower, particularly the paramilitary forces. As far as the committee is concerned, yes, I think they have, the members have given various suggestions. In fact, I was quite fascinated by the recommendation, by the opinion of Mr. Subhash Kashyap regarding the constructive vote of confidence. They have, I think, examined it in detail, but constitutionality is certainly going to be challenged by the opposition parties.
And why do you think that constitutionality matters in this case? Because there is a
Well,
different kind of opinion that is being aired by experts and others.
the change cannot be brought about by a mere legislation. It has to be through an amendment to the constitution. But the question is whether the course of action suggested by the committee will be acceptable to the judiciary or not is to be seen. But political parties may not, at least from the opinions generated by these political parties, they seem to be questioning the constitutionality and the federal consequences of such a measure, etc. So they may certainly take it up to the court, and the court will have a final say in the matter. So constitutional amendment is a sine qua non for this measure. You cannot avoid it. But the constitutionality is, of course, is a question which is to be debated, I suppose, in judiciary.
Do you think that in this current form, the bill will withstand the scrutiny of law?
Well, I don't think I'm really qualified to say that it will be upheld in the judiciary. But if the opinion that has been expressed by the committee, namely two-thirds majority in the parliament, is good enough to bring about this, if that has been upheld by the court, then I think there should be no difficulty. But whether the consent of the states is required or not, I am not very clear or sure about it.
But that's one point that political parties, the opposition parties, are demanding that it has to be ratified by the states. That is something which is mandatory, right?
No, but then there have been constitutional experts in the committee. They have given this recommendation. So
That
I
it's
take
not
it they have
required.
examined the pros and cons of it, I suppose.
Okay. Now you said that for administrative purposes it's fine, but the bill is more the move is more political than
There is
administrative.
no doubt about that. It is more a political issue. As I said, from the point of view of cutting down the expenditure, saving a lot of time, energy, and resources, it's certainly at least a measure that needs to be considered. Whether it is to be accepted or not is probably depends upon the political consensus that is evolved. At the moment, there seems to be a lot of polarized views on this. But there was a parliamentary committee, standing committee, which had gone into this issue. In fact, I had appeared before that committee. And they have recommended at least, I mean, they have said ideal would be to have simultaneous election. But in the absence of ideal, at least to bunch the elections over a period of, gap of 2 or 3 years, so that this time spent on campaigning, the time, money spent on conducting campaigns, etc., could be substantially curbed.
But if this is only, a case about that simultaneous election should happen to, bring down the expenses, it's more an administrative issue that can be dealt differently as well, right? Why do you need simultaneous election for that? You could have brought in electoral reforms because that is something that has been talked about for a very long time.
Yeah, if most of the electoral reforms are implemented, I think the question of having simultaneous election may look redundant. But election reforms, there seems to be no political consensus on that either. You see, look at the manifestos of most of the political, almost all the political parties. Nobody talks about the need for electoral reforms. It seems that the political parties have a vested interest in the status quo. So, if the reforms are seriously addressed, many of these problems could be solved. There is no doubt about that. This is one of my grievances that the political parties seem to have really ignored the need for bringing about changes. For example, the one first past post system, I think it has outlived its utility. Similarly, regulation of political parties by a separate law. Thirdly, the funding of political parties. These are issues which need to be considered, but nobody seems to be serious about it.
But why do you think that that no consensus have arrived over these years on these issues? These are critical issues.
I agree, but then I suppose the political parties, the leadership, they are all responsible for these state of affairs. And the political parties should have a long-term interest of the nation for bringing about electoral reforms. But I don't think they are serious about. They are quite satisfied with the status quo.
So one of the arguments that are made by opposition parties is that one India, one nation, one poll will give undue advantage for national parties, and the regional parties will be sidelined in the scheme of things. How do you look at this argument?
I'm not sure about this criticism of national parties because probably the criticism leveled by some of these parties is that the federal interests will be tainted by introduction of this method. See, some national parties also stand for election in the state for state legislatures. It is even if the state national parties get prominence, the national parties, at least in many states, they are the ruling party, so there is no direct adverse consequence on that. But the point that has, at least what I have read in the newspapers, is that they think that the federal spirit is affected. But I went through another comment by a constitutional expert. There was some sense in what he said. He said the federal relations are spelled out in the Constitution. The state and central lists, they are made clear. And then the powers of the center in amending the Constitution or the powers of the states in respect of some of the policy matters, they've all been clearly defined. So how does it affect the federal spirit? The only criticism that can be, I thought that can be leveled against probably is that when a simultaneous election is held, that the national issues get more focused and the regional issues are probably not given the importance that they deserved. There seems to be a certain amount of fairness in this criticism. But let us look at the experience the last 75 years. There have been many states where the people, the voters have voted differently for the center and for the state government. So you cannot say that it automatically follows that the federal issues are ignored during a simultaneous election. As you know, till about 1967, most of the elections were simultaneous, except the local elections. And it went on fairly merrily. I suppose there was no big adverse criticism about it. But with the growth of regional parties and with the growth of more number of political parties with political ideologies and political views, this has become too acute a problem, and they seem to be leveling this criticism. But my own feeling is, if you look at it in the long-term interest of this nation, the voters are mature enough in this country to distinguish between the state and central legislature, and they will certainly vote. But here again, as you say, the public perception or the political party's perception is different. And this is where it is be ideal if there can be a kind of a political consensus between the parties before we go ahead with this kind of a major measure.
The scenario that was prevailing in the 50s and 60s was something which is very different from what we are witnessing now. So, a national party that has resources, that has money, that has amassed huge amount of donations through electoral bonds, will have an unfair advantage when there is simultaneous elections. Only that party can reach out to the people with different methods of campaigning and all that. So these are all issues that the regional parties are scared of.
No, no.
They cannot fight the might of national parties.
I agree. Is there no undue advantage as of now? Is the simultaneous election going to solve this? That is why I say the best method is to fund the elections only from public money. The elections should be public funded. I have suggested on many occasions.
How can that happen?
I am suggesting that corporates and the individuals should be allowed to contribute to a national election fund and get 100% tax exemption for the donations. By that, you are snapping the connection between obnoxious nexus between the political parties and the corporates. Because as you know, the parties which are funded by corporates get influenced in their policy making because of the donors or the amount of donation. So the best way to deal with this issue is to snap the obnoxious nexus between the corporates and the political parties. That can be done only by having a national election fund and by giving the corporates also the freedom to donate the amount, because even now, the present system, there is difficulties for the corporates to decide to whom give the donation. They have to give both the ruling party as well as the opposition party to guard against any adverse consequences. So you have to find a better method of funding the elections. And this is my suggestion. I have been doing it suggesting this for quite some time. Unless you snap the ties between the corporate donations and the political parties, the yields of conducting elections in this country will not be, I think, solved.
Do you also think that the government is rushing into introducing this bill without building consensus? Probably they could have done it a little differently.
No, but as I said, originally the recommendation of the committee was 2029, and now they have made it 2034. I believe, at least it is my impression, that they want to have enough time to build this consensus. I hope they will do it, so that there is discussion and debate among all the parties, among the non-governmental organizations. So 2034 is a fairly good time span that they have thought of.
And talking about bringing transparency or containing the kind of money that is pumped into elections and all that, the election commission could have played a larger role in trying to create some kind of transparency in political funding in the entire process, or they can also contain the cost of elections. They could have brought in so much of reforms.
I don't know whether you are aware, in 2004, when I was the Chief Election Commissioner, I wrote a letter to the then Prime Minister giving the Election Commission's views on the electoral reforms. As you know, the powers of the Election Commission are available only are derived from the Constitution of India and the Representation of People's Act. Many people seem to think that the Election Commission has got a reservoir of powers. Yes, they have a reservoir of powers as per a Supreme Court judgment only in respect of a legislative vacuum. But in respect of all other areas, for example, funding, etc., we can only throw suggestions. Ultimately, it is the government which has to act, or ultimately it is the political parties which have to act. So the Election Commission certainly can play a role, and I think it has played a reasonable role, but may not be adequate for some people. But the initiative has to come from political parties. They must come, sit together. They must arrive at some kind of a consensus. In fact, we had drafted a law for political parties. Actually, the Association for Democratic Reforms had drafted, and it was kind of debated in a meeting under the chairmanship of Justice Venkatachalaya. We had made a lot of suggestions to improve the draft legislation, but thereafter nobody hears about it. What has happened? So there are areas where the political parties should take initiative. Otherwise, the government should take the initiative. One of them should take the initiative. The Election Commission has a very limited role or limited power to deal with this issue.
Even in this committee, former President Ramnath Kovind's committee, there are no former election commissioners.
Well, I don't wish to comment on that.
Then what is the involvement of the election commission or the views of
I know that
somebody who is
I know
there at the helm of
certainly you are
affairs?
entitled to ask this question. As far as I am concerned, government has taken a decision and the committee has given its report. Whether the constitutional committee is proper or not, I don't wish to comment on that. Whatever decision has been taken, now we take it as given and we comment on that or discuss on that.
But can the government dictate these rules or terms? It's only one-sided. That's what it looks like. That is the reason why the opposition parties are all like, kind of opposing it.
Could be that could be a valid criticism, but I suppose they have some constitutional experts in the field, like Mr. Harish Salve and Mr. Subhash Kashyap and so, I mean, instead of going into the composition at this stage, when the report has already been submitted, what is important or crucial is to see how political consensus can be achieved in bringing about this change.
And do you also think that the kind of opposition that we are seeing for one election, one India, one election bill, is also because the how do I put it? The trust in election commission is all time low.
Well, I think there is a lot of criticism on the election commission, but in fairness, I think you have to bear in mind the kind of responsibility that the election commission is discharging. Well, there may be human errors, there are aberrations. I'm not saying that election commission is a super duper body which will not commit any mistakes. Some mistakes may have been committed or some mistakes have been committed. But you take any human institution, even Supreme Court has, some of the judgments have been questioned, some decisions have been revised. So it is fair criticism that some decisions of election commission were wrong. But to attribute motives to the election commissioners or the chief election commissioner, in my opinion, is not fair. I do agree there are sometimes mistakes made. So what is important is how quickly the mistakes are corrected or how effectively they are dealt with.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for talking to us. I'll come back to you when there are more developments on this
Thank
issue.
You so much. Thank you. May God bless you. Thank you.